Apocalypse, Thirst. Wrong train. Episode 4. Terminal velocity. Daylight struck like a weapon. For 23 miles, the train had been swallowed by the Bridgewater Tunnel, its world reduced to red emergency light, echoing steel and the blind language of sound. When it burst free into open air, the sky did not welcome them. It overwhelmed them. White light flooded every surface, bleaching the geometry of the cargo bay into something abstract and hostile. Marcus's pupils constricted too slowly, his vision smearing as the sudden openness pressed against him with the same suffocating weight the tunnel had carried, just inverted. Infinite instead of crushing. The air felt colder outside, thinner somehow, moving across skin that had forgotten what wind meant. Beyond the glare, the world resolved in fragments. Massive concrete walls rising in brutal slabs, gunmetal lines cutting across their surfaces, the unmistakable silhouette of Haven Point looming ahead like a fortress built to outlast the apocalypse itself. Watchtowers bristled along the perimeter at 100-yard intervals, each one crowned with automated targeting systems that tracked the train's approach with mechanical precision. The main gate dominated the southern wall. Reinforced blast doors wide enough to swallow rail traffic, currently sealed tight as a tomb. Above it all, the surface tier sprawled in organized denial. Residential blocks, market districts, schools where children learned mathematics while their parents engineered plagues in the levels below. The train did not slow. A voice broke through the internal speakers, clipped and absolute, the signal cutting across static and distance with military precision.
Train 777, you are designated a terminal protocol target. Reduce speed immediately or you will be fired upon.
Marcus didn't look toward the source. He didn't need to. His eyes tracked the wall, the mounted rail cannons already pivoting on their hydraulic mounts, long barrels aligning with mechanical inevitability. He calculated distance without thinking. Velocity, impact windows, the shrinking geometry of survival. There was no room for error left in the math. Behind them, something struck the rear cargo doors again. Not loud, not frantic, just persistent, methodical. The swarm had not stopped when the tunnel ended. It had followed them into the light, patient as erosion. Car 11 felt cavernous compared to the rest of the train, but the space only emphasized how little ground they had left to hold. Supply crates had shifted during the tunnel run. Some overturned, others split open, their contents scattered in useless patterns across the steel floor. Emergency lighting flickered along the ceiling, dimmed by the massive power draw of something larger, something humming with barely contained energy in the forward section. Sarah moved toward it without hesitation. The Lazarus chamber dominated the space like an altar to desperation made real. A cylindrical structure of reinforced medical-grade steel and embedded neural interfaces, its surface alive with cascading data streams that pulsed in rhythmic waves. Light radiated from beneath its panels, not steady but cycling, as if the machine itself were breathing, drawing power from the train's backup grid in hungry surges. Through the frosted viewport, a shape was visible, human in outline but indistinct, suspended in a haze of vapor and crackling electricity that danced across desiccated skin in controlled arcs. James. The repair cycle had him now, its systems working through catastrophic tissue damage with methodical precision. Neuroelectric stimulation visible as blue-white threads weaving through his nervous system, attempting to rebuild pathways the infection had ravaged. Cell regeneration protocols flooding damaged organs with synthetic compounds designed to trigger healing responses that human biology had long since abandoned. It was keeping him alive, barely, but at a cost the readouts couldn't quite quantify. Marcus registered the data in a single glance. 32 minutes remaining on the cycle. Power consumption spiking to dangerous levels. System integrity holding, for now. Cognitive function, fluctuating between 12 and 47% baseline. The numbers told him James was fighting his way back from the edge of dissolution, one synapse at a time. The external speaker crackled, the sound emerging in fragments, as if dragged through interference that wasn't entirely technological. Sarah? Still there. Her hand hovered over the surface of the chamber, not touching it, not quite. The exhaustion that had hollowed her out over the past days remained etched into her features, but something had shifted behind her eyes. Focus. Direction. The tremor in her fingers had finally stilled, replaced by the steady hands of someone who had already made their choice and was simply waiting for the world to catch up. Marcus's voice cut through the space, low, stripped to function. "We don't have ammunition. We don't have time." He glanced toward the rear doors as another impact shuddered through them, the metal flexing inward by fractions, stress fractures spreading like frost across its surface. "Haven Point is going to fire. The only viable option is separation." He nodded once toward the manual control panel mounted along the starboard wall, its lever waiting like a loaded gun. Manual trigger. Someone stays. Someone doesn't. He didn't look at Riley when he said it. Riley didn't need him to. They stood near the rear of the car, rifle held out of habit more than utility, the chamber long empty. Their grip was tight, tendons standing out along the back of their hand like cables under tension, but the weapon itself had become symbolic, a posture more than a solution. Their eyes flicked once toward the approaching walls of Haven Point, then back to the door that was beginning to warp under the accumulated pressure of bodies that had stopped being human 3 years ago. "Math checks out," Riley said, voice flat, the words coming faster now that they had already run the numbers in silence. "We cut the rear cars loose, reduce mass, increase speed. Maybe we beat the cannons. Maybe." The word maybe hung in the air like smoke. The chamber hissed softly. A pulse of blue-white light flared beneath its surface, casting Sarah's face in stark relief. All angles and shadows and the terrible clarity of someone who had stopped lying to themselves. She spoke without turning. "There's something you need to understand before you pull that lever." Marcus's attention shifted, sharp. He didn't like variables he hadn't accounted for. Sarah's gaze stayed fixed on the chamber, on the blurred outline of the man inside fighting to remain himself. The original neurological mapping for Thirst 7, the reversal pattern. It works. I've seen the data, verified it against every test subject we ever documented. It can cure anyone who still retains higher cognitive function. Her voice did not rise. It didn't need to. It's encoded to my biometrics, deliberately. I designed it that way. There's no way to extract it without my consent, without me alive to transmit it voluntarily. Kill me, and the cure dies with me. Separate me from the transmission equipment, and it becomes useless data on a dead woman's hard drive. The statement landed in the space between them, heavier than anything the swarm could throw against the doors. Riley's jaw tightened. "So if you're not on the front half of this train when we hit those gates, it dies with me," Sarah finished. "Yes." Marcus exhaled once, slow, controlled, the kind of breath that precedes a decision no one wants to make. "Then the separation plan doesn't..." "It doesn't work," Sarah said. "Not if the goal is anything more than dying slightly later." The chamber's speaker crackled again, stronger this time, the distortion less pronounced, as if the repair cycle was pulling his voice back from somewhere deeper, knitting together the neural pathways that let thought become language. "There is another option." Marcus's head snapped toward the chamber. His expression didn't change, but something in his posture shifted, a recalibration of threat assessment, of trust parameters he'd spent hours refusing to adjust. James's voice came in pieces, each word separated by a fractional pause, but the structure of thought remained intact, logical, deliberate. "Haven Point, defense grid, built on my behavioral conditioning protocols, before the outbreak, before I understood what they'd use them for." A pause, longer this time, as if the next words cost more. "I can interfere, override targeting systems, briefly, 90 seconds. Maybe less." Riley let out a short, humorless breath. "You're telling us you can shut down their cannons from inside a medical coffin." "Not shut down. Confuse. Neurological interference broadcast through their command frequencies. The targeting AI will hesitate, recalibrate, buy you time. His voice strengthened fractionally, the repair cycle finding traction. But only if the cycle completes. Only if I survive long enough to generate the electromagnetic field strength required. Marcus's mind moved through the implications instantly, calculating angles and velocities with the ruthless efficiency of someone who had survived by being better at math than everyone trying to kill him. 90 seconds at current velocity was enough, barely. The margin for error shrank to nothing, but nothing was more than they'd had 30 seconds ago. If the repair cycle completes, James continued, the words gaining cohesion, almost human again, I can broadcast, but... His voice faltered, static flooding the connection, then returned sharper, more urgent. Sarah has to be alive, has to choose to transmit. The cure data requires her biological authentication and my electromagnetic field as the carrier wave. We transmit together or not at all. Marcus shook his head once, immediate, the refusal automatic. No. We are not trusting our lives to... To what? Riley cut in, stepping closer now, their voice tight but controlled, every word landing with the weight of someone who'd already accepted the impossible. To the guy who's been right about everything so far? To the scientist who infected himself to prove a cure was possible? Or should we trust the facility that just threatened to erase us before we even slow down? Marcus turned toward Riley then, finally meeting their eyes. There was something there he hadn't allowed himself to acknowledge before. Not fear, not quite. Something closer to inevitability. The look of someone who had run every equation and arrived at the same terrible answer every time. We trust him, Marcus said slowly, each word deliberate. And we're betting everything on two people who built the system that ended the world. Riley nodded once. And if we don't? Marcus didn't hesitate. We die in under 2 minutes when those cannons turn us into scrap metal and burning flesh. The rear doors buckled again, a deep metallic groan running through the frame, the sound of structural integrity beginning its final countdown. Riley exhaled, sharp and final. Then stop pretending there's a choice. The words hung between them, not an argument, but a confirmation. The acknowledgement that survival had stopped being about clean options somewhere around the moment they boarded this train. Marcus looked back toward the chamber, toward Sarah, toward the thin line of possibility threading through impossible variables. He moved to the panel. The swarm broke through. Not all at once, not with cinematic collapse. The metal simply failed, a seam splitting wide enough for darkness to pour through in a liquid rush. Shapes followed, their movements wrong, their presence defined by the absence of light and the wet scrape of calcified bone against steel. They moved with the patience of things that had learned to wait, had learned that time was always on the side of hunger. Marcus's hand closed around the lever. Now. The detonation was sharp, concussive, controlled violence tearing through the coupling mechanism with surgical precision. The floor shuddered beneath them, dropped a fraction, then stabilized as the connection severed. Sound snapped through the air. Too clean, too final, the kind of noise that ends things permanently. For half a second, everything went black. The shockwave hit like a physical wall. Marcus was thrown forward, his body slamming into a supply crate hard enough to crack ribs, the impact driving air from his lungs in a sharp gasp. Metal shrieked. Glass shattered somewhere in the darkness. The world tilted as the forward section of the train, cars 1 through 10, surged ahead under its remaining momentum, lighter now, faster, the separation charges having done their work with brutal efficiency. When emergency lighting flickered back to life, the world had split. Marcus pushed himself upright, tasting blood, feeling his chest protest with each breath. He turned, already knowing what he would see. Already calculating the distance, the physics of separation that couldn't be undone. Smoke curled through the air between the cars. Through it, he saw Riley, just beyond the threshold, on the wrong side of the widening gap. Not by choice, not by heroism, just by physics. by the chaos of a shockwave in a confined space, by being 2 steps too far back when the world fractured. Their eyes met across the expanding void. No words, no reach. No time for anything resembling goodbye. Just recognition. The terrible acknowledgement that the math had worked exactly as planned and someone had to pay the price anyway. Riley's rifle slipped from their hands. Finally, the symbolic weight becoming too much. Their hands, empty now for the first time since they boarded the train, rose slightly. Not in surrender, but in something that might have been understanding. Then the distance grew too wide for eye contact to hold meaning. The rear section, cars 11 and 12, carrying Sarah and James and Riley and the swarm and everything they'd fought to protect, decelerated rapidly, the loss of the engine's momentum bleeding away in seconds. The cars veered slightly on the tracks, metal screaming as they carved a new trajectory across the rails, momentum carrying them in a wide arc that would bring them to rest somewhere on the outskirts of Haven Point's kill zone. Marcus watched them go, his tactical mind still calculating even as something in his chest tried to crack open. Riley, Sarah, James, the Cure. Everything compressed into those failing cars, tumbling away into smoke and distance. Then he forced himself to turn forward. Haven Point filled his vision like a promise made of concrete and lies. The cannons tracked the approaching train, their targeting systems locking on with mechanical certainty, then hesitated. The barrels wavered, tracking arcs becoming erratic, confused, as if the machines themselves had forgotten how to compute threat assessment. Behind Marcus, in the rear section he could no longer see, the Lazarus chamber flared, a pulse of electromagnetic energy so massive it lit the morning sky in blue-white arcs that climbed toward the clouds like inverted lightning. James's neurological override, burning through Haven Point's command frequencies with every erg of power the chamber could generate. 90 seconds of confusion, of hesitation, of borrowed time. The train hit the gates. Impact erased everything else. Metal shrieked against metal. The blast doors, built to withstand siege weapons, buckled inward under the combined force of momentum and desperation. Marcus was thrown again, his body ragdolling through the command car as physics demonstrated its indifference to human fragility. He felt something in his shoulders separate, tasted blood flooding his mouth, saw stars exploding across his vision in patterns that had nothing to do with the emergency lighting. When the world finally stopped moving, it came back in fragments. Hands dragging him from wreckage. Concrete scraping beneath him, rough and real. Sky too wide overhead, the blue of it obscene after so much darkness. Voices shouting in military cadence, boots surrounding him, weapons trained on his broken body like he was still dangerous. Then stillness. Then a figure standing before him, backlit by Haven Point's morning sun. General Patricia Reeves. She wore her uniform like armor. Not the dress uniform of ceremony, but the working fatigues of someone who had built her authority in operational zones, not conference rooms. Insignia crisp despite the chaos. Posture rigid with the particular discipline of career military who measured their worth in compliance and results. Her face was sharp-featured, weathered in ways that suggested field command rather than desk assignments. Eyes the color of slate assessing Marcus with the same cold efficiency she might use to evaluate damaged equipment. No fear in those eyes, no uncertainty, just calculation. "Where is Dr. Vance?" she demanded, the question delivered with the absolute confidence of someone who had never been denied information and didn't intend to start now. "Where is the research data? Where is the override access to Train 777 systems?" Marcus lifted his head, blood running from his split lip, ribs screaming protest. His vision swam, doubled, then focused on her face, on the certainty there, the assumption that she still controlled this situation, that the math still worked in her favor. He smiled. The expression was wrong on his face, too knowing, too satisfied for a man kneeling in his own blood with rifles pointed at his head. It cracked through his tactical composure like light through a fault line, transforming him from defeated soldier into something infinitely more dangerous. A man who'd won by losing everything. "She's alive," he said, the words clear despite the blood. And in about 3 minutes, She's going to broadcast everything you've done to every frequency and range, every survivor settlement, every civilian radio, every emergency channel still operating between here and the coast. His smile widened, showing red teeth. You should probably evacuate sublevel Omega, or don't. The bodies will look bad either way. Something shifted in Reeves's eyes then, not fear, but recognition. The face of someone who'd built contingencies for every scenario except the one where the evidence walked into a transmission tower and chose truth over survival. She opened her mouth to speak. The sky lit. Blue-white light erupted from the wreckage stopped on Haven Point's outskirts, a massive electromagnetic pulse that climbed into the atmosphere in branching, fractal patterns that looked like neural pathways drawn in lightning. It was visible from every corner of the facility, impossible to ignore, beautiful and terrible as revelation itself. The Lazarus chamber, burning through its final reserves. James Khalil's electromagnetic field, amplified beyond anything the designers had intended, broadcasting on every frequency simultaneously with enough power to overwhelm Haven Point's communication grid. And riding that carrier wave, a voice. Sarah's voice. It came through every speaker, every radio, every communication device within a 5-mile radius. In the markets where civilians bought their daily bread. In the schools where children learned sanitized history. In the apartments where families pretended the walls beneath them didn't echo with screams. In the command centers where officers like Reeves had spent years burying the truth under operational necessity. This is Dr. Sarah Vance. I am the creator of the Thirst 7 bioweapon. Her voice was steady, clinical, the tone of someone delivering a laboratory report, because that's exactly what she was doing. I am broadcasting from Train 777, 1 mile southwest of Haven Point's perimeter, and I am here to confess to crimes against humanity. The world stopped. Reeves stood frozen, her certainty cracking like ice under weight. Marcus remained on his knees, still smiling, blood still running, watching her face as the broadcast continued. 3 years ago, I led a research team developing adaptive bioweapons for the Unified Defense Council. We were told the Thirst program would create controlled deterrence, surgical solutions to asymmetric warfare. We were told the subjects were volunteers. We were told the infection could be contained. A pause, breath drawn. We were lying to ourselves. Across Haven Point, 50,000 people stopped what they were doing. The infection was never controllable. The volunteers were coerced. Prisoners promised reduced sentences, civilians facing exile into quarantine zones, refugees who believed cooperation meant survival for their families. We documented this. We continued anyway. When the outbreak began, when the infection spread beyond our laboratory projections, we activated terminal protocol to eliminate the evidence. Every transport, every containment train, every subject who could testify to what we'd done. The electromagnetic pulse pulsed brighter, James's field strength holding despite the impossible drain. But there is a cure. Sarah's voice strengthened, gaining something that might have been hope or might have been defiance. They sounded identical in this context. The neurological mapping can reverse Thirst 7 infection in subjects who retain higher cognitive function. I am transmitting the complete data set now on open medical frequencies to every research facility within range. It cannot be buried. It cannot be classified. It belongs to everyone who survived what we created. The data burst, transmitted in the background, compressed research files exploding across the airwaves like seeds in a firestorm. Sublevel Omega is still operational beneath Haven Point. They are still conducting thirst trials on subjects who believe they're receiving treatment. The acquisition logs are included in this transmission. The mortality rates, the disposal protocols, everything. Reeves's hand moved toward her sidearm, the motion automatic, the last reflex of control slipping away. Marcus didn't move. He didn't need to. The broadcast wasn't coming from him. To the families of the subjects designated as Project Lazarus participants, your loved ones did not volunteer. They were taken. I am sorry. to the survivors in the quarantine zones, you were not abandoned. You were disposed of. I am sorry. Sarah's voice cracked fractionally, the first break in clinical precision. To Dr. James Khalil, who proved that intelligence could survive infection, who sacrificed himself to give me this chance. The electromagnetic pulse flickered, dimmed, held. Thank you for remembering my name. For 3 seconds, there was only static. Then the pulse exploded outward in a final surge, bright enough to cast shadows at noon. The electromagnetic discharge burning through the Lazarus chamber systems, through James's failing biology, through every barrier between truth and the world that had tried to bury it. In that light, something moved in the wreckage. 2 figures supporting each other, emerging from smoke and twisted metal. Riley and Sarah, alive. Behind them, the chamber cracked open like a chrysalis, steam pouring from its interior. The viewport shattered. A hand emerged, skeletal, crackling with residual electricity, but moving with deliberate control. James Khalil stepped into the light, not cured, not whole, but conscious, aware, human enough to choose each step, to turn his face toward Haven Point's walls, to raise one hand in acknowledgement or farewell or accusation. The electromagnetic field around him pulsed once more, carrying Sarah's final words. This transmission will repeat on all frequencies until someone silences it. You know where we are. You know what we've done. The choice of what happens next belongs to everyone who's listening. The broadcast looped, began again. This is Dr. Sarah Vance. I am the creator of the Thirst 7 bioweapon. Reeves's hand fell away from her sidearm. Around Haven Point, 50,000 people stood in doorways, in streets, in their homes, listening to the confession repeat, watching the electromagnetic pulse light the sky, seeing the smoke rise from the wreckage where 2 people and a monster stood together in the ruins of everything they'd built and destroyed. Marcus, still kneeling, still bleeding, still smiling, looked up at Reeves. Your move, General, he said. The broadcast looped. The world listened. And for the first time in 3 years, the truth was louder than the lies built to contain it.